So if what has been argued is true, that there's no rational reason to create a person for the benefit of the person being created, then is there at least some rational argument to be made for the sake of having a child for the sake of others, for the sake of the parents, the family, society, or the human race at large? Even given how fundamentally selfish many of these arguments are, I do believe it can safely be said that these truly are the best arguments that have been made against antinatalism, or at the very least, the not as bad arguments. And this is because there's at least a chance at a rational argument to be made from a consequentialist perspective. That a given couple could have a child that could go on to help relieve and prevent more suffering in the world than they would cause or endure themselves. That they could go on to become one of the relatively minuscule beacons of light in this cold, dark world of ours. This incredibly ambitious reasoning for having a child can safely be summarized as forcing them into a very messy, very risky procreation sort of Ponzi scheme. Right off the bat, it needs mentioning, and I don't think many would disagree, that the vast majority of people don't go on to help relieve and prevent more suffering in the world than they cause or endure themselves. So already this is a hell of a gamble. And then you throw in the fact that no one chooses to be brought into existence to begin with. So not only is it a hell of a gamble, but it is a gamble that you are taking on the behalf of your prospective child. A gamble that is guaranteed to result in various forms of suffering and eventual death. Again, along with there being a very real possibility of your child experiencing a level of purposeless suffering that is far beyond your current comprehension. A level of suffering that you yourself would never willfully endure. But with this said, though, it is clearly a gamble that people are never going to stop taking. And the people who are the least fit to take the gamble are far more likely to roll the dice. So I can at least more easily empathize with those who go into it with what they genuinely believe to be good intentions. The people who are apprehensive in regards to the colossal decision and treat the immense amount of responsibility of parenthood with the respect that it deserves. Contrast this with the masses of people who are unable to think far past their selfish desire for a complex sentient project/plaything, an extension of themselves that will share many of their same qualities and features. A special enough long-term project to finally fill the void inside of themselves, in the hopes that their child will unconditionally love them more than anyone else has ever loved them. And the people who have children in the hopes that they will go on to succeed where they have failed solely for the purpose of parading them around, as though their child's accomplishments will fall into their own lot of accomplishments or lack thereof by default. So they can go, look what I made. Look what I was able to mold together. Not bad, huh? And the people who have children in a sort of futile grasping at immortality, and the people who have children in the hopes that they will one day take care of them when they're older, and the people who have children in an attempt to come across as normal and well-adjusted, the list goes on. It's also worth mentioning that around half of all pregnancies in the United States are accidental pregnancies. Half, along with many other countries. And of this half, around half results in abortion or miscarriage, and the other half results in birth. And this is easy to empathize with as well. Especially when you're young, it is so easy to get caught up in the heat of the moment. Not long ago, I had absolutely no respect for the causal nature of life. No appreciation for the potential for consequences that can come about as a result of such carelessness. I'm sure you've heard it countless times, but I will say it anyways. It's not worth it. The risk is not worth it at all. You are playing with some very dangerous fire. Your primate brain is lying to you. And I can try my best to articulate just how high the stakes are, but words can never do it justice. I can say things like, a few minutes of pleasure can cost someone a lifetime of pain. And as I say that, the weight of it isn't felt. It can't be. But it's absolutely true. A few minutes of pleasure can cost someone decades of severe pain. If you aren't ready to have a child, or you feel as though you never will be as careful as you possibly can. But even in regards to those who would make some of the best parents, I would argue that there are far less risky, far more constructive ways of putting their time and resources to good use than having a biological child. There is an obscene amount of suffering and deprivation that already exists. Rather than likely just contributing to more of it, we have an opportunity to lessen some of the incomprehensible amounts of it that has already taken place. Which I admit often feels completely futile, given how much of it is occurring and how distant it oftentimes feels from our own lives, our own worries and desires. And it's far more difficult for human beings to care about the welfare of children that aren't their own. But from the same consequentialist perspective of having a child for the sake of others, this is a far more reliable way of going about doing things. For us to at least try and put out some amounts of the fire that is all around us while we're already here, rather than forcing another child to try and maneuver around the flames. If you're someone who's already had a biological child, or you're someone who is so dead set on having one that there's nothing that anyone could possibly say to change your mind, let alone some random guy on the internet, I think the best advice I can really give is to frequently remind yourself of the potential that exists as a result of the decision. The potential in its entirety, both good and bad. These frequent reminders are crucial due to how inconsequential the trivial day-to-day raising of a child oftentimes seems, especially from the outside looking in. And due to this, it can be easy to frequently lose sight of just how difficult and significant the task of raising a child really is. Because it is true that there are horrible things that can happen to your child, and there are terrible things that can happen to others as a result of your child, either directly or indirectly, that will be entirely out of your control. But it is also true that your behavior as a parent has the potential to leave a gigantic impact on who your child becomes, what your child endures, and what kind of an impact your child will have on the lives of others. And in this sense, having a child is by far the most significant thing that most people will ever do with their lives. By far the most, the biggest commitment that they will ever take on. This responsibility should not be taken anywhere near as lightly as it oftentimes is. Simply put, if you're going to play as Dr. Frankenstein and conjure up a human being, at least make sure that you are prepared for the task at hand. Or at least make sure that you are prepared to lead by example, because there's a hell of a lot at stake. If there's anything you'd like to add, feel free to leave a comment below. Hopefully we can get some good constructive discussions going. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.